It's time for our Saints and Titans Film Watch Wednesday. Why the Saints continue to play so much better later in the games than earlier in the games. Why the defense continues to give up those pesky passes over the middle of the field. And Doug Mouton of WWL TV joins to talk about what happened, what happens next, and how the New Orleans Saints can get a win against the Philadelphia Eagles next weekend. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day here on Locked On Saints. Don't forget, we're available for you free and on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Canal Street Chronicles, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. We're doing something a little different with our Film Watch Wednesday today. Usually I just kind of dive in and we talk about a bunch of notes from both the offensive and defensive sides, but I started to feel like that was a little bit disorganized, and I think you deserve better. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk offense first, then we're going to go into the defense. But what we're going to do is kind of go position by position and break this down a little bit more appropriately. So we're going to go with the biggest takeaway from each position first, and then fill in the context, and then we'll flip over to the defensive side. So let's start with the quarterback, Trevor Siemian. Quarterback is the most important player on the field. He has been the most important player on the Saints offense over the course of these last couple of weeks since he came in to replace Jameis Winston after Jameis Winston suffered that ACL tear, also had some MCL damage as well after the Devin White tackle up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How has he performed since he has been the starting quarterback in the black and gold? Well, honestly, he's performed pretty well. Listen, I'm not going to come out here and say that Trevor Siemian is the future of the New Orleans Saints. I'm not going to say Trevor Siemian's turning into a franchise quarterback, but I will say that as you watch this game with the Tennessee Titans, you can see that Sean Payton, this offense, very comfortable with Trevor Siemian. Trevor Siemian, very comfortable in this offense, and sometimes too much, like to the furthest extent. And that might be my biggest takeaway about Trevor Siemian. I don't see a fire from him, but I see a ton of efficiency from him. Sean Payton talked about this game on WWL radio, mentioned that there were some things that he could have done to help Trevor Siemian, particularly in the 2-minute drive, where Siemian took 2 sacks in a row, maybe some, additional progression, some additional reads, things like that could have helped him out. But honestly, when you look at Trevor Siemian, the thing that stands out about him the most is that the first half just isn't his half. In the second half, he usually performs better. We took to the film to figure out why that's the case, and the simple fact is that once Tennessee, and the same thing with the Atlanta Falcons, built up a little bit of a lead, they softened on defense. And that's where Trevor Siemian and the Saints offense were given the opportunity in both of these games to come to life. It's why they continue to storm back at the ends of games. So if you want to put this team away, you have to continue to be on the attack. If you start to soften up your defense, and the way that Tennessee did that is that the pass rush was a little bit different. They started to contain a little bit more. They started to focus on the run game a little bit more. The linebackers weren't attacking as much, and the secondary softened up a bit to where the zone started to open up. The pockets between zones started to open a bit, and they weren't attacking the football as aggressively as they were attacking it in the first half. All of those things make it a lot easier for a quarterback, particularly a veteran quarterback who knows how to read a defense and who is a smart quarterback like Trevor Siemian, to be able to attack and be efficient. So that's what we saw. Everything lighten up, soften up a little bit, just enough for Trevor Siemian and this New Orleans Saints offense to be able to storm back late in the game. On the offensive line for the New Orleans Saints, the biggest takeaway, interior pressure continues to be an issue for them. You look at the 3 players on the offensive line that let up pressure. Calvin Throckmorton, left guard, he let up 1. Eric McCoy, center, he let up 1. And then Cesar Ruiz, he let up 2, who's your right guard. So again, it's your interior offensive line. You also had a pressure let up by James Hurst as well, came late in the game. But you see all of that pressure coming from the interior. Not that Trevor Siemian was under pressure very much. The Saints offensive line actually held up really well against a very talented defensive line. You just can't tell if you just look at the numbers, because what you see is 9 pressures, which isn't terrible, but then you see 4 sacks. And so Jeffrey Simmons was an absolute monster on the interior, and that's really where a lot of that pressure came from. The Saints actually handled some things like communication, stunts, things like that pretty well. It was just that they weren't able to really keep up with the strength on the inside that Tennessee was able to pack from quarters 1 through 4. I would say quarters 1 through 3. They actually tightened up as they continued on throughout the game. And quarters 1 through 3 are consistently different for the New Orleans Saints over these last couple of games than just quarter 4. Doug Mouton's going to talk about that here in a little bit when he joins us toward the end of the show. All right, let's go over now to the receivers, pass catchers. We know the issues right now. You're still seeing some drop passes. It wasn't as egregious as what you saw up against the Atlanta Falcons, but you still had a couple of drop passes. But I will say my biggest takeaway from both the pass catching sort of core here is going to be Deonte Harris as well as Traequan Smith. Both of them are showing you that they're the most complete receiving options that the Saints have available, and that's a good thing. Traequan Smith, since that little sort of tiff that he had on the sideline with Jameis Winston, has performed much, much better every day. And remember, Sean Payton has called out Traequan Smith before. Sean Payton actually giving Traequan Smith credit this week, saying that he's liked what he has seen from him over the last couple of weeks. You look at the touchdown that Traequan Smith scored, that was a scheme-driven touchdown. In order for scheme touchdowns or for the scheme to work, you have to know how to execute it. Traequan Smith executed that perfectly. The play action on the fake run there, and then Traequan Smith faking the block over on the inside, and then being able to cut to the outside for the touchdown. Extremely well executed. Sold it super, super well. And that's what you like to see from these guys that have been in the system for 3, 4, 5 years. You want to see them continue to be able to be schemed open. We saw that on the opposite side for the Tennessee Titans a ton throughout the game. A lot of times when receivers were running open, it was because of the scheme. It was because of picks. It was because of stacked receivers creating confusion for defensive linemen. It was because of traffic being created by crossers over the middle, things like that. You're starting to see that work a little bit more for the New Orleans Saints than we have over the course of the season. Another example of a player, though, creating on his own is Deonte Harris. We talked about it a couple days ago, but just to bring it back up, Deonte Harris getting that fantastic outside position leverage up against the DB, swatting the arm away, and then getting up the field for the big 40-plus yard completion. He and Trevor Siemian linked together, which Trevor Siemian kind of overthrew. Deonte Harris had to kind of reach for it, but hey, he came down with it. That's all that matters. And we saw a couple of other players get open. Kevin White was essentially open on that touchdown, on that pass that he dropped, kind of hit him in the bicep, just didn't have his hands in the right position for that catch. I don't know if we're going to see, I know that they signed Kevin White to the 53-man roster. I don't know if we see him this week or if we see another receiving option, Kwon Baker, Aesop Winston, potentially even Lil Jordan Humphrey, actually be active for this game as opposed to Kevin White. We'll see exactly what happens there. Another one that I'll shout out was a nice little pass in the bucket down the right sideline to Deonte Harris. Beautifully placed ball by Trevor Siemian over the defender, and then Deonte Harris making the catch and getting out of bounds. This was toward the end of the game or toward the end of the half, one of the two. But just really well executed, beautiful ball placement, and just smarts altogether by Deonte Harris to get out of bounds on that one. And of course, listen, the tight end position, you look at the screen that they ran to Adam Troutman that picked up 7 yards. That should have been well more than 7 yards. You have a lot of the same mental processing errors that you see in a play like that contribute to the same mental processing errors that lead to the false start at the end of the game on the 2-point conversion. It's consistent at this point. So I'll be very interested to see if the Saints make a change, if we see more Juwan Johnson, if Nick Vanette is indeed healthy and is ready to go. He was called a healthy scratch last weekend. If that's the case, wouldn't be surprised to see Nick Vanette get in and then potentially see Adam Troutman's snaps drop and him reduced to more of a blocking complementary tight end role as opposed to a tight end 1 role. We'll see exactly what the Saints do moving ahead to the Philadelphia Eagles. But before we switch gears over to the Eagles or toward the defense, one last piece here, the running back, the big takeaway here, Mark Ingram can still lead your offense if you need him to. And it's outstanding. It's outstanding to see. This guy goes away for 3 years, comes back, and fits right back in and had to do a lot of things that they weren't anticipating asking him to do in this game. Sean Payton said that when Ty Montgomery got hurt earlier on and his pinky sort of bent the way that it's not supposed to, doing a bunch of stuff that ain't supposed to be doing, they ended up losing Ty Montgomery. That changed the game plan for them. It changed play calling for them because Ty Montgomery was going to run a lot of the sort of receiver usage out of the backfield that the Saints run with Alvin Kamara. Well, once they lost Ty Montgomery, they weren't able to call those anymore. But then later on toward the game, they started calling them with Mark Ingram. Think about the wheel route over to the left side, beautifully placed pass, again by Trevor Siemian there, beautiful catch and execution by Mark Ingram. That play worked so well that they basically called it again to the opposite side at the end of the game to try it for the 2-point conversion. So shout out to Mark Ingram, who not only became the Saints' all-time franchise leading rusher or rushing yards leader in this game, but also showed you that if you still need to rely on him as your lead back, there's a lot of reasons to be comfortable about it. And that's good news because a knee sprained or a knee strain for a running back could keep them sidelined for a couple more games. We'll see what happens with Alvin Kamara. We'll get an injury report later on today. So we'll see how it all goes. But hey, if you need to lean on Mark Ingram based on what you saw last week, you should feel pretty good. All right, so that's the offense. Next, we're going to talk about the defense, including why they continue to give up those pesky passes over the middle of the field. Is it scheme driven? Are they getting beat? What's going on? We'll talk about it, break it down, dissect it, and look at much more over on the defensive side as we continue our Film Watch Wednesday today on Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, we talked about Mark Ingram getting that juice for the New Orleans Saints offense. Let me talk to you about getting the juice that you need to keep your car running, but not having to do it at a price that breaks your bank account. It's with the Get Upside app. You can get 25 cents back per gallon on your fill up with the Get Upside app. I said it slow because I wanted to make sure that you heard it. That's up to 25 cents back per gallon just by downloading this free app. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to do anything. Just you go to a gas station that they have a partnership with, you put it up on the app, you fill up, and then you can get up to 25 cents back per gallon. That's it. That's easy. And you can cash out whenever you want at any point, and you can get it sent straight to your bank account. You can do it through PayPal. You can get it as an Amazon gift card or other brands as well. This is really cool. And best of all, for your first fill up, after you go and download that app, because I know you're about to do it, because you get it at the Apple Store or Google Play, so there's no reason not to. You can get it wherever it is that you get your apps. You'll go ahead and use the promo code touchdown. So on your first fill up, you get that 25 cents bonus and you can get up to 50 cents back on that first fill up. This is awesome. People are making $200, $300 a month off of their gas prices. This is great stuff, especially right now while gas prices continue to rise expeditiously. So go ahead and get that Get Upside app wherever it is that you get your apps. And don't forget to use the promo code touchdown for that 50 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. It's 25 cents back per gallon after that with the Get Upside app. All right, Who Dat Nation, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks so much again for being here with us today and for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the show. We're continuing on with our kind of new approach to Film Watch Wednesday. Please let me know if you like this. The feedback is important. And if you like this structure, then maybe next week I'll start to do some visual elements and stuff like that. Can't actually put film up because I want to be able to keep a podcast, but I will be able to do some visual elements up over on YouTube that include some text and stuff like that. But let me know if you like this structure first, and then we'll move forward from there. So now we're jumping over to the defensive side, and we're going to start off with a topic that everyone's been asking about all week. And I completely understand because I've been asking about this all week as well. What is going on with the New Orleans Saints giving up these crossing routes over the middle of the field? So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the big takeaway is that it happens for a couple of different reasons. And sometimes it is intentional. Sometimes it very much isn't. So when we look at this Tennessee Titans game, you gave up over 150 yards over the middle of the field, and you allowed Ryan Tannehill to basically complete anything he wanted over that area with a couple of exceptions, but some of those exceptions being drops by like A.J. Brown. Anthony Ferkser had a drop that was on the sideline, but it was a crossing pattern, for instance, things like that. So what is it that leads to this? Okay, there were a couple of times in which you saw players just plain get beat. One example of that is that you had a pass that went on a slant route over to the left side. It was a route being run from the left side, but coming toward the middle, where Marshon Latitmore just got beat. He gave him the outside, or he took the outside leverage, which means that he basically turned his back to the inside of the field, to the center of the field, to try to force the receiver to the outside. Well, the receiver cut back on a slant route back inside, which essentially Marshon Latitmore had already given his hips to the sideline, so he was just out of position at that point. And so it was an easy completion. So there's examples like that, but then there are also scheme examples as well. And that goes for both sides of the field. For instance, a scheme example for the New Orleans Saints giving it up because of their zone coverage calls might be a zone blitz. Sometimes there were times where they vacated literally 10 yards of the field over the middle of the field to either put pressure on Ryan Tannehill or take away some deeper developing routes. And they particularly did those on third down, perhaps second and long as well. So there were a couple of occasions in which they did that. Play action is another scheme-driven way that the Titans were able to create that over on the offensive side. On an obvious passing down, a couple of occasions, they ran maybe even a play action. On some cases, they ran a double play action when they had an I formation behind Ryan Tannehill. With that play action, it brings the linebackers into the line of scrimmage and then opens everything up for a quick crossing route that's developing over the middle of the field. And then another example would be a bunch of crossing routes, mesh concepts, if you're a Madden player, but a bunch of mesh concepts over the middle of the field create traffic. And when that traffic is created, it's up to the defense to have traffic discipline. They have to know which lanes they're taking based upon the route that their receivers are running. And sometimes that is a lot harder to do than it is to say out loud. And there's absolutely no doubt about that. But there were times where players got lost in the midst. Marshon Latitmore had one moment to where, a pick route, one that was two receivers out on the right side, out on his side. His player to the outside of that leverage, I believe it was Marcus Johnson in that case, was running across the field while someone from the inside slot was coming outside, ends up bumping Marshon Latitmore. And then there you go. Marcus Johnson is open for a huge catch and run, but the Saints had also vacated that area of the field because they were in man coverage. So when you win on those big crossing routes, particularly against man coverage, there's no zone linebacker that is, has your back over the middle of the field that you're running into. You really don't have any zones until you get into the third level up against the safeties. So that's one of the big ways that the Tennessee Titans actually took advantage of the Saints' aggressive press man coverage corners, was by running a lot of those crossing patterns. And I think we're going to see that. And I think that's one of the reasons why you saw the Saints adjust and add a lot more zone coverage. Again, Marshon Latitmore in zone in this game 48.4% of the time, the most so far this season, where the Saints have mostly really focused in heavily on man coverage. So the Saints had to make that adjustment. Dennis Allen made some nice adjustments towards that in the second half, but it's tough to make those adjustments on a play-by-play basis, even a drive-by-drive basis. You kind of need that halftime to rebuild, and that's exactly what you saw from the Saints defense. Now, even though the middle of the field got left open because of Tennessee's brilliant schemes in a couple of places, or even the New Orleans Saints voluntarily leaving that area of the field open to take away deeper developing routes, the linebackers should not be overlooked in this game. One of the things that you picked out from the film, one of my big takeaways with the linebackers, Demario Davis, Kwon Alexander, they are still so good on the field together and are still so much fun to watch. Kwon Alexander's been a little bit shaky in coverage since he's come back from his injury and everything so far this season. But I got to tell you, there are a couple of plays where that guy just erases the field. He erases gaps between him and ball carriers, and it's absolutely incredible. There's a play that I'll probably put out on Twitter later on today that has a ton of eye candy. Ryan Tannehill starts in the shotgun. He's got D'Onta Foreman to his immediate left. And then A.J. Brown comes in motion from the outside to Ryan Tannehill's immediate right. So now all of a sudden, Ryan Tannehill is flanked by Foreman and Brown. Once they start the play, or once they snap the ball, you see A.J. Brown run what looks like it's going to be a wheel route out the backfield, and then you see D'Onta Foreman run into the flat. And so with that, it gives you a lot of eye candy. You've got Bradley Roby, who's in man coverage with A.J. Brown, who tracks A.J. Brown to the outside, does a good job taking that away despite the fact that he has some traffic to work through. And then Kwon Alexander comes all the way from the right side of the defensive formation, because remember, he's actually in man coverage up against D'Onta Foreman, who's on Ryan Fitzpatrick's left, and ends up getting the dump-off pass behind A.J. Brown. Kwon Alexander just closes the gap and makes the tackle on third down. And he has to fight through. I mean, there's a tight end that's running a crossing route at that point. He can't get picked by him, so he's got to be able to go over him. You have Bradley Roby running through A.J. Brown to get to D'Onta Foreman as well, and the both of them make that play. Just really, really incredible athleticism. And again, what we've always observed in Kwon Alexander, and something that we missed in Kwon Alexander last year when he got injured, and the Saints had to go back to Alex Anzalone on the field, that sort of diagnose and react ability that Kwon Alexander has, that read and react ability that he has. You see it all over the tape in this one. And then finally, on the defensive line, my big takeaway is maybe not so many stunts against fast-throwing quarterbacks. Remember, the New Orleans Saints had only 9 pressures in this game, and when they did get pressure, they got it early on in the throw clock, 2.59 seconds up against Ryan Tannehill. But some of that also has to do with how quickly Ryan Tannehill simply got the ball out of his hands. It's not that they forced him to throw it any faster. It's just that when he was under pressure, he already had the routes to go to, and they had already developed an offense around him that allowed him to throw the ball more quickly. This is why numbers don't give you everything, and it's why we always look at film on Wednesdays too, to help get that additional context. And one of the things that the Saints did a ton of is that they ran a lot of these stunts with like Marcus Davenport and David Onyemata, who don't really run stunts very well together. Cam Jordan, they ran one stunt where they took him out from outside the right tackle to stunting all the way around and trying to get in between the left guard and center, which is just too long developing a stunt to try to run up against a guy like Ryan Tannehill, who gets the ball out very quickly. So while I admire the Saints and Dennis Allen for their creativity along the defensive line, and we saw how much it pays off to rotate the defensive lineman as Marcus Davenport continues to come to life late in games because he can outlast the offensive linemen that are out in front of him, the creativity in terms of stunting and motion and all this other stuff that they're doing works really, really well in some cases, but isn't always going to work against against some quarterbacks. If you're going up against these quarterbacks to get the ball out quickly, then run those stunts on the interior with Demario Davis. Don't run them with him coming from the second level. Don't run them with the edge rushers trying to peel all the way to the opposite interior, to try to penetrate all the way to the opposite interior. You're not going to be able to get there quick enough. So with that, I love what the Saints are doing, but maybe readjust a little bit, and we might see them readjust a little bit when they're going up against these sort of faster pitching quarterbacks. So, all right, y'all, that's offense and defense. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about this segment. You can let me know if you're watching on YouTube down below. If you want to, you can also hit me up on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Let me know what you think. If you like this, we'll keep this format, and I'll add some visual aids over on the YouTube side that just have like some text for the takeaways and things like that. So as we continue on with today's show, though, we're going to be talking here in just a moment with Doug Mouton of WWL TV. Going to talk a bit about what happened with the New Orleans Saints in this loss up against the Tennessee Titans. He's going to give you a great takeaway about how much better Trevor Siemian has performed late in games as opposed to early in games. And we're also going to look ahead to the Philadelphia Eagles game as we start to turn our attention to the next matchup for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that coming up for you here in just a moment as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And before we get to that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Built.com, the best tasting protein bars on the market. If you haven't tried a Built bar yet, you are missing out. These are not the protein bars like you're used to. These ain't your mama's protein bars. They should be your mama's protein bars. Get these protein bars for your mama. Stop letting her eat those bad protein bars. Go get the good protein bars at Built.com. These are protein bars that taste like candy bars. If you love your mama, go get the right protein bars. That's all I'm gonna say. But when it comes down to it, these are absolutely fantastic. They're giving you 17, 18 grams of protein, but only 4 or 5 grams of sugar and net carbs. And you're getting these great, fantastic flavors like coconut, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, so many different flavors, all covered in 100% chocolate, soft and easy to chew. And best of all, Built.com is going to have rotating flavors every 3 or 4 days over on the website as well. So make sure you check out the website so you can stay up to date with what they have to offer. And when you get there, don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, so you can get 15% off of your next order. That's 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at Built.com. And don't forget to check out our friends over at betonline.ag. We're going to be talking about the Saints and Eagles all throughout the rest of this week, so we might as well start now. Right now, the Saints 1.5 point underdogs over at betonline.ag headed to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. If you feel good about that line, you like the Saints being underdogs on the road, you can go ahead and take that bet over at betonline.ag. And if you don't like betting on the Saints or the NFL, don't worry. They've got you covered for the MLB. If you want to get into some futures for next season, they got you covered for the NBA, the NHL, MMA, UC, whatever it is that you're looking for. They've got you covered over at betonline.ag. If you think it, you can probably bet on it, including live TV, game shows, stuff like that, as well as your favorite Vegas casino games as well. So go and check them out over at betonline.ag. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. That's promo code LOCKEDON over at betonline.ag, where the game starts. All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. WWL Wednesday is here. Doug Mouton is here at DMouton WWL, as we love to welcome in every week to talk a little bit about the Saints' last game against Tennessee Titans and also look ahead to the Philadelphia Eagles. Doug, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, anytime, Ross.
So let's start with the Saints' loss up against the Tennessee Titans, a disappointing loss for the team, a disappointing loss for the organization. What were some of your main takeaways from the way that this game went down?
Well, look, the one thing going forward on the thing you can improve on is you got to jumpstart this offense a little bit. Mm-hmm. The last 2 games, Trevor Siemian, in the first 3 quarters, his quarterback rating is an 83 in the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, it's a 127. Now, which is obviously excellent. Now, Siemian talked at length after the game about how Tennessee started playing them different and they weren't attacking as much. But regardless of what it is, you got to figure out a way to get things moving sooner, because Siemian clearly shows the ability to make some plays. And the touchdown pass to Callaway was terrific. Siemian can make plays. You got to give him a chance a little earlier. You got to get things jump-started earlier. Now, obviously, against the Falcons, it was drops. in this game. Look, they missed a couple of third downs. You know, they get behind the chains, but they got to figure out a way to get the offense going earlier. But then my primary takeaway from this game is you had no Alvin Kamara. You got a terrible call on the Caden Ellis roughing, which basically gave Tennessee 7 points. You lost the turnover battle 1-0, and you had 2 missed extra points. You had all those things piled on top of each other, and you took the AFC's #1 team down to the wire. And still, if Adam Troutman doesn't jump on the 2-point conversion, you still might win that game despite all that stuff going wrong. Troutman jumping was the final straw, the fifth thing that you just couldn't overcome. But to overcome all those things and still be in the game, you know, you got 2 wins against division leaders. You beat the Patriots, who might be the hottest team in football right now.
Right.
And you went toe-to-toe with the AFC's #1 team with all these things going wrong. Like, there's still plenty of light in this tunnel. You just got to stop the self-inflicted bleeding and get a little bit lucky, which hasn't happened. Look, here's my look thing. Deonte Harris gets hit, fumbles, the ball bounces straight down. Tennessee gets it. Ryan Tannehill drops the ball. It rolls 8 yards downfield, and the Saints can't get it. I mean, it was just pure blind luck on how those 2 balls bounced, and they both went against the Saints.
Yeah, it's funny. You saw something similar to that with the 2 fumbles that the Saints weren't able to recover against Atlanta as well, including one when they had the lead 25-24, and Mike Davis was just kind of playing around, hoping to run the clock out. So some of it really is out of your control, right? Some of it is.
I mean, look,
luck.
The ball's a weird shape. Like, will tell you, that ball can bounce a million different ways depending on how it falls. And yes, they're 0 for 4 in the last random bounces. By the simple law of math, those are going to even out over time.
Right.
But in these 2 games, I mean, literally, like, all those mistakes, like, one bounce had been not as weird, and then the Saints could have won. Anyway, I think there's plenty of light. I think they did a lot right, and I think there's still a lot to be optimistic about, and we know what needs to be fixed. It started with kicker. That's the easiest thing to fix. Got to make an extra point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Saints did bring in a kicker to try out there. They brought back Brad Maher, who was with the team earlier on, who was with the team earlier on in training camp. I don't know if that really solves all your problems, but
I don't know.
They're looking at him. They're trying to figure out where to go there.
In the preseason game against Baltimore, he hit 2 extra points.
There you go.
Made them both. If he'd been kicking in this game, would have been a whole different game.
That's absolutely it.
They're down 8. If they could kick an extra point and go to overtime, they got a chance to win. But 2 missed extra points. Anyway.
Yeah. And that's a big thing, right? With those 2 missed extra points, you nail both those extra points earlier on in the game. You're kicking for the win in that situation, 23-24.
Yeah, correct.
You know what I mean?
For the win or kicking for the tie if you could just make half of your
extra. You get one of them. Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, the Saints lead the NFL in missed extra points.
Where we all thought they would be at the beginning of this season.
Yeah, right. and by the way, they've missed 8 kicks this year, field goals and extra points through 9 games. In 2018, which was the last great Saints team, they missed 3 kicks all year.
Wow.
In 16 games, they missed 3 kicks. They've missed 8 already in 9 games.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the next thing I want to ask is, where do the Saints go from here? What do they do next to adjust? But so much of this is just get the field goals, get the extra points, recover the fumbles. I mean, so much of it feels like there are things that you can clearly identify, but maybe they can't actually adjust. It just has to go right. Right. If that makes sense.
Right. They just need to get a little bit lucky. They need to get Alvin Kamara back. I think the offense better and different when Kamara gets back. Taysom Hill needs to be involved in a big way. But look, you saw some open receivers. Kevin White will make a catch. And Trevor Siemian made some throws. There's a lot of pieces that feel close.
Yeah.
And look, I guess the best silver lining of this is before the game, you were in the 6th spot in the NFC playoffs. After the game, you wake up Monday morning, you're still in the 6th spot in the NFC playoffs. With 7 playoff spots and the way the bottom of the NFC is, it's so top heavy in the NFC right now. The good teams are winning so much that there's really no middle class. Right. It's like the Saints by themselves, and there's the top teams, and then there's the bottom feeders.
Right.
So from a playoff standpoint, you're in good shape right now. Now you want to be better than that. The Saints have set the bar higher than that. But the first bar is making the playoffs. And at 5-4, the Saints are in good shape right now, despite all the problems.
Yeah, and have some winnable games coming up in that stretch at the end of the season in December, which can be very, very important for them. But let's look ahead to one more game that they have coming up here this week. I mean, ideally, they have a tough stretch here, these next 3 games at Philly, at home on Thanksgiving Day against Buffalo, then back at home the following Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys. What do the Saints need to do to get that win in Philadelphia so that they could set themselves up for a good run here over these next 3 games?
Yeah, and look, Ross, that Philadelphia game last year was sort of a landmark game in the season. A couple of things happened in that game. One, the Eagles really exposed Taysom Hill. They did a lot of things to force Taysom Hill into bad situations, and that game was obviously by far his worst game as a starting quarterback. He was not good in that game. So the Eagles did a nice job in that area. But the one thing, to me, the biggest difference in the game was the Saints couldn't contain Jalen Hurts. It was Jalen Hurts' first start. He got around contained. And I want to say, because it was one of my takeaways from the game, I want to say it was 8 times to make first downs after getting around either Marcus Davenport or Cam Jordan. The Saints, obviously, that's a huge key, and I'm sure they know that after looking at last year's tape, is that you've got to keep Jalen Hurts between the tackles, keep him from getting outside your ends. And if the Saints can do that, I certainly think they have a great chance to win this. I think they're a better team than the Eagles. But Jalen Hurts ate the Saints alive after getting outside on them. And it was a lot of times he did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, Saints get this win in Philadelphia. It helps them tremendously to set up for that stretch run at the end of the season. Doug, we always appreciate you being here. You can keep up with Doug, of course, on Channel 4 at WWL TV, as well as at DMouton WWL on Twitter. We'll be seeing you again here soon, sir.
All right. Thank you, Ross.
All right, family. Thank you so much for joining us for another Film Watch Wednesday. Don't forget to send over that feedback, how you felt about our the way that we approach Film Watch Wednesday this week. Don't miss tomorrow's episode. You don't want to miss it. We've got Gino Camilleri as well as Louis DiBiase coming through from Locked On Eagles to help preview this Saints and Eagles matchup. Thanks, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day here on Locked On Saints. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out Locked On Bets. They have been on an absolute heater over the last 15 weeks or so. So go ahead and make yourself some money today with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. For everything in between for your New Orleans Saints and in between each show here, make sure you follow on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.